Sure.
Okay, I've opened up the room for everyone just coming on. We're going to wait about a minute or two before we get going. Welcome. Sorry there, Jen, I didn't mean to cut you off. Give it a couple more seconds here. Okay. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today in our continuation of our safety webinar series. My name is Lily Calderon, the Director of Health and Safety Programs for the International. Joining us today is Dave Wasaki, MTEF's National Safety Director, who has been on throughout our series. We also have Dan Flores, MTEF's North Central Regional Training and Safety Director. He joins us for the first time. Dan is a 26-year member of Local 4, Indiana, Kentucky, bricklayer by trade. His career has included the following roles: foreman, superintendent, apprentice instructor, and currently the North Central Training and Safety Director for MTEF. Pleasure to have you, Dan. We also have a guest speaker, OSHA's Region 3 Labor Liaison, Jim Toohey. His jurisdiction includes Pennsylvania, Delaware, West Virginia, Washington, D.C., and Virginia. Mr. Toohey is a facilitator between OSHA's Region 3 and their stakeholders and represents OSHA's Region 3 as a contact for OSHA at meetings of employer organizations, trade associations, labor organizations, as well as community and faith-based organizations. He has worked for OSHA for 25 years as a compliance officer, compliance assistant specialist, and labor liaison. We thank Mr. Toohey for joining us today. Unfortunately today, Secretary Treasurer Jerry Sullivan couldn't join us today, but he hopes that everyone enjoys today's webinar and thanks everyone for their dedication to safety. This safety webinar today will focus on OSHA's top 10 most cited violations of 2022. Most of the top 10 citations that we will see today have been on the agency's top 10 before. Though their rankings might change from time to time, the one that has not changed and has been at the top for the last 12 years is fall protection. By reviewing the top 10 citations, we can have a better understanding of the hazards that our members may face on a day-to-day on job sites and how we can help evade them. We will also hear from Mr. Toohey on what OSHA is doing on different campaigns. Before we begin, I will note that today we'll be discussing U.S. OSHA standards. Though Canadian standards might be similar, we will not be citing any of them today. We do want to let everyone know that no matter whether you are in the U.S. or Canada, these hazards exist on all job sites, so the information could be useful in debating these hazards on any job sites. Few housekeeping rules or items. The webinar is being recorded and will be available for viewing on our website, bacweb.org/safety. We'll have a question and answer section at the conclusion of our presentation. You can also use the Q&A box to submit questions at the end of the presentation or during. We'll get to them in our Q&A session. And as always, please feel free to submit any recommendations for future webinars. Thank you all. And with that, we will begin. I will now hand it over to Dan Flores to start us off.
Thanks, Lily. Next slide, please. Leading off the top 10 2022 citations, this is fall protection general requirements with 5,260 violations. This is an increase in citations from the previous year. We know falls are the leading cause of construction fatalities, and as such, we need to be conscious of our working environment. 1926-501 sets forth requirements for employers to provide fall protection systems. To touch on a few things covered in the standard would be unprotected sides and edges. At 6 feet or greater, the employee needs to be protected by use of a guardrail or personal fall arrest system. Holes on the job site present another potential for falls. There are many opportunities for holes to exist. These need to be covered to prevent possible tripping hazard or fall to a lower level. Protection from falling objects is another item covered under general duties of fall protection. If there's a potential for falling objects, the employer shall have each employee wear a hard hat and implement additional measures. These additional measures could be erecting a tow board, screen, or guardrail system to prevent falling objects. As we go through these slides, imagine working in environments where some of these pictures are the norm, such as the one seen here, where 3 workers are suspending a 4th by a sweatshirt several floors up. Next slide. Hazard communication, or HAZCOM, was the #2 citation for 2022. This moved up several spots this past year, with HAZCOM previously in at the #5 spot in 2021. 32 million workers are potentially exposed to chemicals. HAZCOM's purpose is important with the goal to ensure that the hazards of all chemicals produced or imported are classified and that information concerning the classified hazards is given to employers and also employees. When you hear HAZCOM, you may think of SDS sheets or safety data sheets. SDS sheets have valuable information on them. Some of the main purposes would be to tell users what the hazards of the products are, how to use the product safely, what to expect if the recommendations are not followed, how to recognize symptoms of exposure, and also what to do if emergencies occur. Employers must provide employees with effective information and training on hazardous chemicals in their work area when they start and whenever a new chemical is introduced into the workplace. Next slide. Respiratory protection did fall from the #2 spot in the previous year to the #3 spot in 2022. With engineering controls being the preferred method to prevent atmospheric contamination, appropriate respirators may be needed in conjunction with the engineering controls or while facilitating the engineering controls being brought online. Ultimately, a respirator must be provided to each employee when it is necessary to protect the health of that employee. It is also vital that the employee is trained by the employer on the proper use and care of the respirator. Where a respirator is necessary, the employer must establish and implement a written respiratory protection program with worksite specific procedures. Some of the items in this plan would be medical evaluations for employees required to use respirators, fit testing procedures, procedures for cleaning, disinfecting, inspecting, and maintaining respirators, and training employees on the respirators. The employer must provide respirators, training, and medical evaluations at no cost to the employee. Jim, I'll kick it over to you for a few comments on this past 3.
Thank you, Dan. Been with the agency for quite some time, and it's always still upsetting to see that the fall protection issue continues to be the #1 leading hazard, both cited and causing a causal factor of death. We need to continue to get better and address these hazards. The fact that most of the activities that the masonry contractors are involved in requires a competent person is critical to the safety on the job. So a competent person's responsibility includes making sure that any scaffold set up or any open sides or fall protection hazards are addressed on the job. So that an individual has to understand his or her responsibilities during the day, as in your industry, the leading edge is constantly changing. Thus, safety, you have to be on top of your game. I'm not surprised by the hazard communication standard. I think that folks just take it for granted that people specifically coming out of the hall have a good working understanding of the hazard communication program. Ultimately, though, at the end of the day, it's the responsibility of the employer to have a sufficient and effective hazard communication program, that the training is provided and properly conducted in a language that's understood by the attendant, and that the material safety data sheets, or excuse me, I'm showing my age, the safety data sheets are up to date and current. I'm going to turn it back over at this point.
All right, so I think we're going to move on to Dave Wysocki with the next slide.
Yes, next slide, please. So moving to #4 on the 2020 top 10 citations is ladders. There are numerous requirements and proper ways to use the ladder, as such as do not overload the ladder beyond its weighted capacity. No hazards like grease, oil, mortars, any slipping hazards should be on the ladder. And it should be so labeled so the workers know not to use it. Climbing up and down the ladder, the worker must face the ladder and hold the ladder with at least one hand. Next slide, please. Coming at number 5 on the list, scaffolding. A lot of our members are working on scaffolds, so this one is, true to our heart, just as fall protection is. No matter what industry we're working in, ensuring standards for scaffolding are followed as essential to worker safety. In the scaffold standard under 1926-451, there are some requirements for scaffolds. Here's just some of them. The scaffold components must support without failure its own weight and at least 4 times the maximum intended load. The platforms must be at least 18 inches wide. Guardrails or personal fall arrest systems must be provided to keep workers safe. Like I say, going into the fall protection, and falls is #1 leader. This is where a lot of the accidents for us on scaffolds happen, is they remove the guardrail to either get material or land a mortar or tub, and they never put the guardrails back in place. I would also like to mention that ANSI A92.9 for mass climbers was approved on March 1st of 2023, and it goes into effect March 1st, 2024. This update replaces the ANSI A92.9 2011 version. Some of the major changes to it was, training and education on scaffolding. So we're looking forward to this ANSI standard coming into effect. Next slide. This violation ranks number 6 on the list, is hazardous energy lockout tagout. When employees are servicing equipment or machines, the energy from these machines need to be controlled. Just to address a few of these control hazards, an energy control plan should involve the procedures, employee training, and periodic inspections to ensure that before any employee performs any servicing or maintenance on a machine or equipment, or the unexpected energy startup release of stored energy could occur and cause injuries, the machine or equipment shall be isolated from the energy source and rendered inoperative. We use gas-powered mixers. A lot of times they'll overload it and it'll stop spinning, and then they get their shovel, they're jamming that in there, and they get that release, and it tends to grab that shovel and employees and pulls them in there. So we have to make sure, even working on mixers or any power piece of equipment on the site, we want to make sure it's locked out. Next slide, please. Number 7, it's climbing its way in the ranks this year, is violations for the powered industrial trucks. Last year, the power industrial trucks ranked 9th, but with over 1.5 million forklift operators in just the US alone, it is important to know how we keep them safe. Here are some things the employers can do to mitigate the risk. Training, make sure the worker that is using that forklift or lull is qualified for the work. Forklift operators must complete training and evaluations as outlined in the OSHA standard. The training includes formal instruction, practical training, and an evaluation. Number 2 on that is inspections. That must be performed on a daily pre-shift basis, and most of the manufacturers have checklists for these inspections. We just got to make sure that we're following that checklist when we're doing our pre-shift. Safe environments. We got blind corners coming around the corner, items blocking the path that could result in an incident. Forklifts also that could be too big for the area they're designed to work in. So those are some of the things for industrial trucks. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lily to finish up the last 3 of the, or no, Jim, Tui, do you want to say anything on those 4?
Yeah, just a couple items. Since we have the screen up right here, to make sure that we're clear that the standard for 1910-178 is also, while it's a general industry standard, it also covers the lull operations that you're doing out in the field. That's why you're seeing probably so many violations. the operator has to be trained and certified to make sure that they're capable of doing that type of work on that type of equipment. Lockout, tagout, when you see that out there, the focus 4 hazards, right, are electrical and crushed and struck by and falls. A lot of the caught in between issues that we have are because of mechanical equipment that is not being locked out in the field. So you have to be, you have to have a program in place. It's not something that you have to take lightly. Locks have to be locks and effective tags have to be used to make sure that there's no re-energization of stored energy. Ladders, I've always found to be quite interesting because in all the years I've been doing this, when I see ladder accidents, typically are not because of the defectiveness of the ladder. It's actually the use of the ladder. Or more importantly, it's the right tool for the job. And I'm sure they're all guilty of this, right? So we have to go up to a platform that's 10 feet above us and we have a 10-foot ladder or a 12-foot ladder. So we're going to put that ladder up because it's there, but it's poor planning. We have to make sure that we have the right equipment on the job site to ensure that the ladder is not only on good footing, but also extends beyond the landing area so that you have a firm method of stepping off of that ladder onto the working surface. Last but not least, I want to go back to the scaffolding. This is the bread and butter of your industry, right? And while there is a competent person, the fortunate thing for you folks is that you have stop work authority, right? So if you see a hazard, please fix the hazard. Find it and fix it. You'll be the person that walks away from it and we could have an accident that could be very preventable. All right. We don't, you have a built-in mechanisms within the union to go to your stewards, safety directors on the job site, your foreman, or even your business agents and business managers if there's unsafe conditions on your job site. Your union doesn't want you working that way, and I don't believe that most of your contractors would want you to work that way either. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Next slide, please. So our last 3 on the top 10, though they fall at the end of the list, they are by all means equally important and hazardous. At number 8 is fall protection training requirements. Last year it ranked in at number 7. And like you've heard from Dan, David, and Mr. Jim, it's all about training, right? Training. So when workers are exposed to a fall hazard, the employer shall provide a training program for each worker. Often when the citations are given, the workers were not properly trained in recognizing the hazard and how to mitigate them. They were also not trained in the proper use of a fall protection system. To abate these hazards, the employer needs to provide proper training. Proper training should include hazard identification, procedures for mitigating them, and fall protection and fall arrest systems. Retraining may be required if an employee proves that they are unfamiliar with elements in the training, or if the event that there is new equipment being used, making the former training obsolete. It's important that our members get the adequate training so they can learn how to work safely. It's very important for them to know how to use the equipment that they're going to be using to save their lives potentially. Because if they're not putting on that harness on the correct way, instead of saving their life, they could actually help in serious injury or death. So proper training is required and should be given. Next slide, please. At number 9, eye and face protection. The standard addresses appropriate personal protective equipment for workers exposed to eye or face hazards, such as flying particles and chemical gases or vapors. These hazards could expose workers to potential eye and face injuries, including blindness. Being properly trained in the hazards could help the understanding of wearing proper PPE to help eliminate these hazards. Some of the PPE used to mitigate the hazards are safety glasses and full face shields. So when our members are cutting rebar, they need to have a face shield glasses and a face shield to prevent those sparks from having contact into their eyes. It's not fun getting any of that hot metal into your eyes. Next slide, please. And then finally, at number 10, machine guarding. This is the second year in a row that this is placed at number 10. Workers can be exposed to the hazard when working around machines like saws, grinders, or mixers. Without proper guarding, workers are exposed to chips, sparks, and pinch points. We see more often than not workers that take the guards off of angle grinders. This is dangerous and could have a kickback and can greatly injure that worker. Those are the top 10 citations of 2022. And as we continue to provide hazard awareness training, we hope that we can make a difference in the number of citations, but more importantly, the number of injuries and fatalities. I will now hand it over to Jim too.
Thank you. A couple comments. Fall protection training seems to be a major problem out in the field. I don't understand why, but again, the employer, I think, has a strong belief that when you come out to the field that you're up to date and prepared to address every fall hazard. Well, that's just not the case. So ask questions. You have a right to be trained properly on the fall protective equipment that you're being asked to utilize for your own safety. A little bit of a horror story, but I was with the specific trade, won't be named, and no, it was not your trade, but I had 200 people over 2 days that we were talking about fall protection. And I asked these 200 tradespeople if they knew how to inspect their harness. And out of that group of 200, only 2 put their hands up, and they were both apprentices. I was shocked beyond belief that they didn't know how to do it. So I brought the two apprentices up. They showed the crews how to conduct their inspections, and then I followed with that, with asking that who had a rescue plan on their job site, for which I had a 0 response. So not only are we exposing people to the most frequency to these hazards, it's the most frequently cited hazard, but we're also training. We're not providing the training. And then when these accidents occur, we're not prepared to rescue our brothers and sisters when this happens. So we just have to plan our job out properly. We have to train people properly to make the right decisions. And most importantly, you have to look after each other out there. That's the key to the safety, right? That's the brother and sisterhood. So about 10 years ago, OSHA started a national fall campaign. And this will be coming up in May this year. I'm not sure if your employer is involved. Please, if you're not aware about this campaign, go back and speak to your supervisors, your companies. They may be interested in participating. Typically, what you'll do is, instead of a normal toolbox talk on a given day, maybe you have the whole job site shut down. Just focus on the fall hazards on that job, right? Or discuss fall protection on the job site, or even how to conduct inspections of fall protection equipment. We've been doing that here for a couple of years in Philadelphia, where the union came together with the Contractors Association and the safety professionals in the area, and we were able to systematically go from job to job and inspect fall protection. So the first year that we did was about 6 years ago, and we inspected about 1,000 pieces of equipment. And over 20% of those fall protection equipment had to be taken out of service for failures. These are some of the best jobs in and around the city of Philadelphia. So this is like major projects and very, very good contractors. A little bit shocking to us that a piece of equipment that would ultimately save your life was not being inspected properly or taken out of service. So do yourself a favor, grab a friend, grab a buddy, grab your partner before you go to work tomorrow, and take a good look at your harness, your lanyard, and the rest of your safety equipment while you're at it. Next slide, please. This is why, right? So it's the beginning of time. We've had the falls have been the leading cause of death. In the last year, last statistical year, we had 378 fatalities, and it's not uncommon to see the masonry contractors, employees that working in this industry, as being one of the top leaders in these fatalities. This past year, you were 5th on the list. 11 of your brothers and sisters went to work last year and did not come home. It's not acceptable. We can be better than that together. Next slide, please. Heat on this campaign. This is something we started about 10 years ago. I work closely with the building trades here in the city of Philadelphia. At that point, when we were starting to press to have water, rest, and shade on the job site, the person, now I call him an old timer, even though I'm becoming an old timer, told me that if people wanted water, rest, and shade, they could sit home and drink water all day in the air conditioning. So that's how far we've come over the last 10 years, 10 to 12 years. We have come to realize it's not political, but it seems to be getting hotter and hotter every year. I know in our areas, it starts, as early in April up here in the Northeast where we might have 80, 85-degree temperatures. So OSHA has been focusing on this hazard. And it's really simple. It's quite simple. Like I said, it's water, rest, and shade. But most importantly is the training that you need. Okay. So if you are available or you have never had training, please go to our website. You'll see there's training modules on there for you. Really, the most important thing is learning the effects of heat on you and what it does to your body, and to be able to look after each other out there in the field. Next slide, please. Construction focus 4 hazards these are the killers out there. Over the last, as I noted earlier, we had 378 fatal falls last year. Total of almost 1,000 fatalities are related to these 4 hazards. And in your industry, you're facing these hazards on a daily basis. Not every industry has those same situations, whether it's working up on scaffolds close to electrical lines, whether it's, mechanical equipment being operated around you, lulls and things of that you could be struck by, material handling equipment, caught in between loads that are out in the field. So, this is pervasive to your work. You have to be focused on these. We want you to consider these when we're out on the job site. You take a look at this pure number, right? 986 total construction-related fatalities in 2021. If you think about the fact that we have, on average, just over about 5,000 recorded fatalities a year, you're saying that 1 in every 4 fatalities in all industry are created by these 4 hazards. Thus, the focus 4. We really need to be identifying these hazards on the job site and addressing them. Next. Repeat here, sorry. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you to our presenters. Now we'll open up our Q&A session. I'll leave this slide up for a moment. Contact information for each of us is on the screen, and please feel free to reach out if you need any additional resources or have any questions. Check the Q&A box, see what we got going. Here we go. My employer has told me that I need to be clean shaven to wear my respirator. Is that true? You want to take that?
Yeah, I'll take that. When you talk about the respirator protection standard, that the answer is yes. It states in there that employers shall not permit respirators with tight-fitting face pieces to be worn by employees who have facial hair that comes in contact between the sealing surface of the face piece and the face, or that interferes with the valve functions.
Thank you. Let's see. If a personal fall rest system or ladder safety system is required on the section of a fixed ladder, are all sections required to have a personal fall rest system or ladder safety system, even if those other sections are less than 24 feet in length?
I'll get that one, Lily. Whether an employee must equip a fixed ladder or a ladder section with fall protection depends on the height of the ladder, if it extends above a lower level, thus the distance a worker on that ladder could fall, not the length of the particular ladder section. Section 1910.28B9I requires that employers equip fixed ladders with personal fall arrest or ladder safety systems if the ladder exceeds more than 24 feet above a lower level.
Great. I have one more. How can I contact my OSHA liaison?
Thank you, Lily. So there's 10 regions across the country. I'm in Region 3. It starts up in the Northeast, it's Region 1, New York being 2. And then we move both south and then east to west. And if you go to our website, www.osha.gov, and in the corner inquiry, you type in labor liaisons, it'll show you the contact information for the labor liaison in your jurisdiction. Doesn't mean that you can reach out to any one of us at any time. If you're going to need assistance, perhaps in getting engaged with the region as a result of an inspection or something like that, you really want to talk to the person that's in your region, because they have the contact and they can negotiate and help you navigate that process. I will tell you that, I offer to you, feel free anytime. We do not do enforcement. So the labor liaisons are non-enforcement personnel. We do not engage in inspections, but we are here to answer your questions. So anytime you have a discomfort level, or you're just not sure, perhaps you want to file a complaint, you're not really clear on the matters, if there's other ways to handle the situation, don't hesitate to look to us to provide you guidance. Thank you for the question.
And we have one here. Any stats on percentage of union to non-union workers injured or deceased due to a fall?
I think I'm in the best position to answer that, and I can't tell you statistically whether they're organized or unorganized. That's not a data point that we keep. I will tell you, however, though, that of the inspections that we conduct annually, 20% are union and 80% are non-union inspections. Of those, typically you'll see a higher percentage of citations on non-union job sites as to union job sites. I would have to say that a majority of the fatalities that we have, though, are smaller contractors. That is definitely something that we do see, and the Hispanic population, Latino population, seems to suffer at a greater rate than any of the other populations, the worker populations across the country.
Thank you. We have a question. If you can unmute yourself, Mark, you can ask your question. Maybe you didn't mean to raise your hand.
I apologize, Lily.
I
It was an accidental touch. I am driving, but I am driving safely.
All right, good, brother.
Thank you.
No problem. We do have another one. How do you prevent unregistered workers from taking risks that I myself otherwise wouldn't?
Well, like Jim said, we need to look out for everybody, even if we're in a right to work state and you got a non-union contractor next to you. You want everybody to go home at the end of the day. So, I mean, if you wouldn't do it, if you see someone else doing it, stop them, tell them, it's unsafe. Or if you can't understand it, they don't understand English, find someone that can tell them. But obviously, end of the day, everybody goes home at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Are there any further questions? Well, seeing none, would anybody here, any of the panelists like to say anything, last words before we sign off?
I guess I had this opportunity. So, I mean, when I came into the agency, I was a former carpenter. Please don't hold that against me. And
oh, if we would have known that,
it could have been a lot harder, right?
Oh wait, there's a question too. So
listen, the relationship between OSHA and the Bricklayers Association here in Philadelphia and across the country is continuously improving. OSHA is not the bad guy. We're not out there just looking to issue citations. We really want folks to obey conditions and make sure that they come home at the end of the day. We continue to improve our relationship. It's been an honor to be invited to participate and speak with you tonight. Just know that we do care, and it's not just inspections. So reach out to your area offices. If you're a person in leadership with your organization, don't be afraid to go and introduce yourself to the area director or the staff. When an OSHA person comes out to your job site, doesn't necessarily mean that there's been a problem. they may want to talk to you just because they want to make sure that everything's safe on the job site and get your perspective. So I know, it's probably hard to believe, but yes, we are in this together. So that's all I'd like to say.
Thanks, Jim. I do have one more question, or actually a couple now. So this is towards you here, for you here, Jim. What is OSHA doing to improve the silica issues?
So as you're aware that we had table 1 out there, which I thought was a great start. And the actual update to the silica standard has been incredible. Unfortunately, a lot of the folks been around for a long time will not see the benefit of this, but I know that as we continue to grow, the industry continues to grow. With the work is going to be fantastic over the next 10 to 20 years. And so, these improvements, making sure that people are trained, making sure that people are monitored, making sure that people are wearing their respirators. It's relatively new, but the young folks that are coming in, this is what they're going to be bred to understand. And, you saw the picture earlier, Dan, I still walk down the street and see people dry cutting concrete and blasting dust all over the place. We've still have a long way to go. The table 1 application covered many of the activities that are prevalent out there in the construction world, but not everything. So I believe shortly, and Dave may could back me up on this, that they're going to be reopening the table for additional activities that can be considered and covered under the silica standard that will allow the employer, if they're doing the right thing per se and using wet processes and using engineering controls to reduce the silica dust, that they can do it without a full-blown per se program with all the elements of the program. Did I capture that, Dave?
Yeah, I'll mention it. Yeah, pre-COVID, OSHA did open up table 1 for public comment. You're right, Jim. We had 18 tasks in that table 1 that was a good start. But obviously, it wasn't enough for everybody. Table 1, if you're not familiar with it, there was a lot of testing done with NIOSH and our organization, testing different tools that we use, wearing air monitors, and OSHA came up with some tables that if you followed the table, you wouldn't have to do all that testing and monitoring. So when they did open it up, like I say, pre-COVID, COVID hit, and it kind of went to the wayside because they were fighting, for the the COVID outbreak that we had. We did hear that it is on a long-term action plan. They're hoping, the last ACOSH meeting we had at the end of February, they're hoping by maybe August, September, we might hear a little more about, more tasks going into there. I know some of them that were on there was, using a hammer and chisel, how much dust is be creating using a hammer and chisel. Some mortar knives for the tuck pointers. They did some testing on that. So there is we're hoping there's a lot more than just 18, when they come back out with the notice. So
And
hope there's another question on.
yeah, and that's kind of related. It's related to what we were just talking about. Says we can only wet cut for 4 hours. Has there been data to support that wet cutting with the chop saw, hand saw is unhealthy after 4 hours?
I would say if they did the testing on it, they did the testing with the permissible exposure limit, and obviously going after 4 hours with a chop saw, it was probably over the permissible exposure limit. That's why they limited it to 4 hours. So I'm sure NIOSH has some data on that. Do you know who asked that question? Because I can get a hold of CPWR and see what researchers did it and see what their data was.
Yeah, I'll send you the name.
Yeah, send me the link and we'll find that out. We'll see what kind of data is out there to support that, or how unhealthy it is, or what the exposure limits were after 4 hours with the partner saw or the chop saw.
Great, thank you. Okay, now seeing no more questions, I'd like to thank again our participants, our guest Jim Tui, for taking the time to be on this call. It's important that we have guests like Ms. Tui here and build the relationships with OSHA, and to better to better help us. You know, like he said, OSHA is not the enemy. We can work together and get results. You know, help our members stay safe and healthy and come home every day. Again, thank you all, and hope to see you on our next one, which will be coming up soon. You'll get a notification. And again, thank you and have a great night. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Matt,
Thank you,
thanks.
everybody.